Escape Room is a new horror film by Sony, directed by Adam Robitel, and it's also the first film to be released in 2019 as a January tradition. The first weekend of January always has a horror film. But what's really weird is that last year's first horror film was Insidious: The Last Key, and that was also directed by Adam Robitel. Very coincidental. And this film opens up with 6 strangers with their own unique stories meeting up at this trial escape room run, and if you can get through it, you can actually win $10,000 because it's so hard. Only they find themselves trapped in a very, very dangerous game of the escape room, and they have to try to work together to get out of it alive. I know I didn't do a review of it, but Insidious: The Last Key I actually found to be just kind of fine, you know. If I had to grade it, I'd give it a C+. Adam Robitel, I haven't seen The Taking of Deborah Logan, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, and you can definitely tell by watching Insidious: The Last Key that Adam Robitel has a very interesting eye when it comes to making movies. So when this film was coming out, I immediately recognized, yes, this is the first film to be released in 2019, it's a January horror film, it can really suck, and there are some things about the trailers that didn't really sell me completely, but I was still kind of interested to see where else Adam Robitel's career could end up, so I walked into this film mildly skeptical, and I'd say for the most part Adam Robitel actually did a pretty good job with the directing in this film. This movie actually gets pretty tense when you're actually in the escape room scenes. Like, each room has a very distinctive design or element to it that I actually found really creative, and I think that this movie really utilized all of its potential when it comes to making these rooms as creative as possible as far as getting out and actually living. Like, it opens up pretty suspenseful, and even some characters remark, like, that was already pretty hard, so how much harder could the rest of the escape rooms be? So that was kind of a good way to kind of increase the tension. Like, that first room was really difficult, and you're telling me there's at least maybe 5 more? Jesus Christ. And by switching up the different elements of the escape rooms, that also adds more tension, because you never know what's coming next. My favorite escape room by far, the upside down one, that had the most tension to it, I felt. That was the most, like, visually creative, not just from a set design one, but as far as everything you see is, like, straightforward, but the room around you is completely upside down. You're, like, hanging off the ceiling, but it's actually the floor. Like, it was just a really creative room, and I really liked the way they went about making that sequence. A really, really good standout in that scene, and also in this movie, Deborah Ann Woll, who I really like as an actress from Daredevil. I think she had a really good role to play in this movie, as well as the rest of the cast. They all have solid characters to play. It's not the most profound look at characters we've ever seen. It is pretty simple, to say the least, but at the same time, I was never really annoyed with them, and I actually found myself really invested with what was going on. I was actually pretty interested to see if they were going to survive and make it out okay. Taylor Russell plays the character of Zoe, who is the sort of protagonist of this movie if you had to pick one. I thought she had a really good performance. She's like the really mousy kind of girl who has to kind of grow out of her shell a little bit as the movie goes on. I enjoyed seeing that. Also, Tyler Labine as technically the comedic side character in this movie. I really liked him. There's something you could really love about him. He's just a really nice, charming dude. And Logan Miller in this movie, I was actually really impressed by him. I've seen him before in a couple movies. One you will immediately recognize, Love, Simon, but also this movie called The Good Neighbor, where I thought his performance was really good, and I'm just really glad that his career is taking off a little bit more as years go on. I can't wait to see what he does next, because in this movie, I thought he had a really good role to play. I really ended up rooting for him a lot. Nick Dodani plays the character Danny, who's been to a bunch of escape rooms before. He's basically just the big nerd in the group, and I guess you could say that his character development feels a little shoehorned in there. Like, you could say the same about Tyler Labine. Every other character, I think they develop them pretty well enough. It's just those two characters where they just kind of throw something in at the last second almost. But even he was actually a likable presence. I was a little worried because he's a big nerd who's freaking out over this escape room, and I didn't know if that was going to be grating or not, but I actually really liked him. I liked how they utilized him in this movie. Jay Ellis, though, as the character of Jason, he was a little good for the most part, but there are just some instances where you could tell, like, maybe you should have put a little bit more into the performance. Overall, not a bad character at all. Like, I actually really got interested in what his character was all about and how they developed him. It's just that the acting in a couple key moments could have just been a little bit better, but for the most part, I really did like the cast in this movie, and I actually found them quite watchable, and you could actually get invested with them. And speaking of that, this movie definitely does have its issues. There's a couple obvious green screen moments that you can tell, like, okay, the budget was rather limited, and you can also, there's a lot of obvious audio dubbing going on, which was completely distracting to me, and I had no idea why it was like that bad. I haven't seen a movie with audio dubbing this bad in a while. So it was a little shocking to me. And as much as the opening scene, like, that's a hell of a way to open a movie, but it did alleviate a specific tension that you could have felt throughout the rest of the movie. I think there's a way you could have edited that opening scene so that You could be in a little bit more suspense as the movie went on. You could watch that opening scene and not know everything that's going on. But I know not everyone's gonna have a flaw with that. This is just something I tend to have a problem with more than others, where movies open up with scenes that you see later in the movie, but it's after a lot of stuff has went down, of course. But I gotta say, besides all those issues that I just mentioned, I was actually having a pretty solid time with this movie. It wasn't the most riveting or exciting thing I've ever seen or anything, but it actually was pretty nail-biting in a lot of different ways. Like, as soon as you get into the first escape room, I was already tensed up, and I was actually pretty excited to see where else they could go, especially when some of the deaths start coming in. I thought the way they were writing the escape rooms, how the characters had to get out of them, that was actually pretty clever. And though something happens near the end of the movie that's a little implausible, it's kind of something that I kind of expected, like, okay, you're keeping the mystery of it, like, whatever, it's fine. And I was actually pretty pleased with this movie. It was a decent, solid movie until the movie doesn't end where I think it's going to end. They keep going for another 2-3 minutes, and it's nothing but sequel bait. It's a commercial for the next movie if this movie does well enough, which it could. It's got a very low budget, so maybe this could be a surprise box office darling, but after seeing what they want to do with the sequel, which doesn't even feel like Escape Room anymore, it feels like a spy movie almost, I'm not for it. It ends in a terrible way, and I'm so sick and tired of movie studios, and especially Sony, even though I love the Emoji Movie, don't get me wrong, but I'm really tired of certain movies that are just perfectly fine, perfectly watchable, ending in a way that's just baiting at the next one, like, oh, if you like this, well, here's the last 5 minutes of the movie dedicated to the sequel. You want to see the sequel, right? Like, can you just end at a place where it's like, oh, I don't know if they could make another one or not, but I'd be down for it. Like, I thought this was pretty decent, and I thought they were about to do that until they just, I don't know what happened. I think it was the screenwriter of this movie had a really good idea of this, and they wrote it and they liked it, but then a studio executive came in and was like, I see franchise potential in this. You should write in a scene where they bait the sequel. And the writer was just like, ah, crap, all right. I guess it's a paycheck, better do it. And that's just so disappointing to me. Honestly, I was having a decent time, and I was about to walk out feeling like, you know what? That was solid. But then the ending happened, and it was like, oh my god, you just ruined it. Like, I walked out angry at that point. Never make an audience member walk out angry. You could feel the room, that everyone was kind of having a good time enjoying it, but then as soon as the ending happened, you could just feel in the air that everyone did not want to be a part of it at all. Everyone just wanted the movie to stop. So I gotta be honest, as much as I did enjoy a lot of Adam Robitel's direction, as much as I did enjoy the escape room segments that were there, as much as I actually did kind of care for these characters, at the end of the day, this movie actually found a way to disappoint me with its sequel bait ending, with its obvious ADR moments and some pretty lackluster CG green screen stuff, 2 character backstories that just feel kind of thrown in there at the last second, and some implausible thing that they write in near the end just for the sake of a twist. So overall, as much as I actually did find some fun with this movie, the issues that it has definitely bogs it down to the point where I can't really recommend it to everyone. I can actually recommend it for like a rental, or if it ever goes to like a streaming service, I'd say pause it right before it gets to the last 3 minutes and you'd have a decent movie. That's when I'd recommend it to you. But when you're in the theater, you can't even walk out fast enough to miss what they put in at the last minute of this movie. So it was fine, but it could have been so much better, and it could have been just a really solid standalone thriller. But instead, it's a startup to a franchise. Okay, I guess. I'm gonna give Escape Room a C+. As much as I really wanted to walk out saying it was a decent time, I just really can't do that. I would recommend you seeing it just later when you can. Pause it right before that ending comes up. But if you really do have an interest in this movie, I'd say you can go see it. Like, if you're really pumped to see this movie, maybe you should go see this in the theater, because I walked in just kind of skeptical and I ended up thinking it was okay. So if you're really pumped, maybe you'll really like it. I don't think anyone's gonna like that ending though. But if you've seen Escape Room, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.